Let's talk about Las Vegas because um, as we started talking about before, and we got disconnected because of audio problems. Um, what we talked about before is how no matter what the situation is, it really seems like nothing ever changes. Nothing. And um, audio is good. Thank you. Um, it honestly feels like nothing ever changes. And it doesn't matter how many people are killed. It doesn't matter how they're killed. It doesn't matter, in this specific conversation. It doesn't matter in terms of what type of gun was used. The one thing I know that's more important in the United States than anything else is this loose interpretation, as our last caller mentioned, this loose interpretation of the Second Amendment. And I want to jump off there on this conversation because it is the same people who tell us that we should view the Constitution with the strictest interpretation. The same people who tell us that we should, when we read the Constitution, that we should not read it as a living document, but we should read it how the founders wrote it, with the strict constitutionalists, originalists. Those same exact people have the loosest definition of the Second Amendment, the loosest interpretation, the most liberal interpretation and reading of the Second Amendment imaginable. And these same people have taken, they've taken the Second Amendment all the way to the point we're beyond gun control now. We're not even talking about gun control anymore. We're talking about whether or not the Second Amendment extends all the way to having silencers. There's a bill in front of Congress right now. I think it got pulled this morning, but not officially. Through some back channels, I heard that this bill is being pulled temporarily. But the bill is to loosen restrictions on the access to silencers. Because as we all know, hunters need silencers on their guns, apparently. And if you watch the video and the footage from last night in Las Vegas, or early this morning in Las Vegas, you know that one of the number one ways, the most distinct thing from this video, besides the sheer terror, is the sound, the noise, the just spraying bullets. But it was so loud that they heard it and they were able to hear it over the volume of the music at the country music festival. And had this man had a silencer, no, it would not have gotten rid of all the noise, but could they have heard the bullets over the volume of the music? It's a good chance they would not. And then all of a sudden, people would just be falling. Can you imagine how many people he could have killed if he had access to a silencer? And this is a bill that's in front of Congress now, conceptually extending the Second Amendment, no longer to just being about gun control, but access to silencers. This is where we are. And I'm wondering if people who are victims of it, and before we restarted the broadcast, it was somebody brought up Steve Scalise, and would he change his vote now that he's been a victim of gun violence? But I'm not sure that they're capable of seeing the cognitive dissonance that occurs in their brains when they simultaneously demand a strict interpretation of the Constitution, but then demand the loosest interpretation of the Second Amendment. I don't think that they could even see the hypocrisy. So why would we? And then furthermore, they showed us that they do not even care when it's children. 20 kids, 7 children, Sandy Hook. They don't even care then. So the question was, would a victim of gun violence change their mind, particularly elected representatives? Would they change their mind? And I believe that they would not, because the grip of the NRA in the United States is so strong that I don't think we'll ever break away from it until we destroy the NRA. Because everything's a Second Amendment argument to them. Everything's a Second Amendment fight for them. You know, the right to own, bear, and have freaking silencers on their weapons is a Second Amendment fight to them. So that's where we are. We're not even at the point of gun control anymore. We're not at the point of background checks. We're not at the point of you know, we are discussing silencers. Yeah. So sorry about that. Had to check something. But that's where we are. And I'm thrown off because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happens. I've never seen that before. I thought I've heard automatic rifles before, but man, I have never heard anything like that. I've never heard anything that, I mean, I don't even know how many rounds he got off in each magazine. Did anyone get an estimate of how many rounds went off in one magazine? Because you could tell he had to reload. But between reloading, he had the longest sprees of just rapid fire that I have ever heard. And the victims are probably a lot of conservatives, not because of political reasons, but because they're at a country music festival. And, you know, I'm sure there's some liberals that like country music, but just, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking it's going to be a lot of conservatives, you know, and I could be just dead wrong on that. But the victims of this are more likely to be in favor of loose gun control laws. And I'm just thrown off because experiencing something like that, you would think that it would change a lot of minds. Matter of fact, I think it did. One of the artists performing on stage who got away and thankfully was not killed, he said that he has changed his mind on gun control. But then that begs the question, do we have to wait till everyone experiences this type of tragedy before they change their mind on gun control? I certainly hope not. Does it have to come to your backyard? Does it have to happen to you before you change your mind? I mean, just the sound alone. The sound alone was so, I mean, terrifying that you pause and you wonder, like, you don't wonder, you make a statement like this. The ease with which we are able to get access to weapons that can inflict mass casualties and death and destruction is the problem. And if we continue to have organizations like the NRA and political parties like the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, who's incapable of going, I guess, above and beyond and doing whatever and everything and anything necessary to stop it, if that's where we are, then we're going to continue seeing things like this happen. We're going to continue to see things like this happen. And you know what? The sad reality of it is that we're right back where we were a year ago. We're right back where we were a year ago with people taking the standard talking points, the standard positions. Yeah, but more importantly, we're right back where we were a year ago, where we now can say yet again that we have had the most violent or the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history again, because that's where we were last year with Pulse nightclub. I remember the feeling, the gloom, the sheer horror of finding out what this was and what was happening and how many, and the body count kept going up. The most surreal thing that has ever happened, and not that this is about me, but it is still about each of our individual experiences with this collective grief. But for me, the most surreal moment was when I had been on Twitter, saw the Twitter moments, saw that 20 people had been killed. I logged it off and came back to Twitter on my mobile phone. You know how you do, you pull your screen down to refresh it, and it refreshed and it jumped to 50. And I'm like, what? Without what? Like what? How? This is, and then as difficult as that was, realizing what has to happen for an individual to cause over 500 people to be injured. Now, mind you, some of them are going to be casualties of stampedes, yes, but in general, he shot enough rounds to injure easily 200 people, even probably more, on just from bullet wounds ricocheting off of the concrete. Even if he didn't hit them directly, it hit the concrete and scatter somewhere else. So not only is the sheer number of people who have died terrifying, but the number who have injured. And to think that we have the ability to get access to these types of weapons. And mind you, yes, automatic weapons are illegal to sell to civilians, but you could take a semi-automatic weapon, modify it, and make it automatic.